Our Iceland adventures in 1989 began on the Easter weekend when the snow was still deep and definitely blowing. But it was a nice and sunny day, and we had to get out. So we went out to the west coast of the Reykjanes Peninsula where the snow was still a little deep and there were a few unplowed drifts. But we had cabin fever, so out we went. A little digging, a little towing, we were off again. Later in April, we go to the south coast. The snow had melted, the sun was warm, relatively, so we came to Seljalandsfoss, a very nice waterfall on the south coast. This was our first folk club outing of the year. Just a little bit further east of Seljalandsfoss is a very nice waterfall, Skogafoss, about 180 feet tall, between 180 and 200 feet. And it being a nice day, we turned into the Thorsmork Valley and went up a little further. We came to Merkiafoss, which comes down through a very nice gorge. Looking across the Thorsmork Valley, we found the glacier Eyjafjallajökull, which is still very snow-covered. Even when the snow goes off, there's still quite a bit of ice here. This volcano is about 5,000 feet tall at its highest point, and last erupted in the 1820s. So we started into Thorsmork to see how far we could get it. And staying on the road where the drifts, unfortunately, were a little deeper, we got a little stuck. But you had to stay on the road because there's too many big boulders off the road. And a little tug here and there. That's the advantage of doing it as a club. Well, maybe one or two more tugs. Going in a little further, we got below the glacier Gígjökull. We'll see more scenes of this glacier, Gígjökull, later on. At the end of May, at Memorial Day, we went down the south coast even further to Skaptafell National Park, one of the more dramatic places in all of Iceland. Below a 7,000-foot peak, at the edge of the Vatnajökull Glacier, which is the world's third largest ice cap. There is a forested hillside and a very nice campground. The temperature was in the mid-50s, so it was pretty comfortable. 30th of May, and the plants were just leafing out. One of the advantages of a dome tent, if you don't like where you've got it, you just pick it up and move it. That's yours truly. We had a nice crowd on this trip. Everybody really had to get out for the first season trip. First overnight trip of the year. Going east of Skaptafell is an incredible sight, a glacier lake at the foot of the Breidmerkajökull. The lake is called Jökulsárlón. Dug out by the glacier. In fact, I'm standing on the original glacial moraine. This lake's about 330 feet deep and just chock full of icebergs. As you can see, some of them are white, some of them are very green, and some are pretty black with all the glacial and volcanic dust that the glacier has dug up as it's pushed past these old volcanoes. These icebergs really don't move too much. They basically just float around for a long time until they either completely melt away or they get small enough to go through the outlet river. And of course, anytime you're near a glacier, you want to get up closer than you could, or as close as you can be. So we drove over to the base of the glacier, right at the very snout. Looks like snow, but it's ice, almost as hard as steel. Although it's hard, as the glacier pushes, though, it does slowly bend and flow like a real stiff putty. In June, we made the first of our 3 trips of the year into the stowing area, but the river was too high to go any further up the valley, so we looked at the old archaeological dig here. This shed was built up over the dig of a farm from around 1100 AD. It was buried by one of the explosions or explosive eruptions of the volcano Hekla. A little later on, in the month of June or early July, we head up to Hagavatn at the base of the glacier Långjökull. Well, we didn't quite make it up that slope, but we did up this one. Climbing up one of the old glacial moraines. It got a little bit steep here and there. Just a little bit steep. But with 4-wheel drive and some trace of a track, it wasn't really that hard to do. Pointing to the sky. And at the top, quite a view. One of the flows out from the glacier Långjökull and the lake Hagavatn. Another glacial lake formed when the glacier retreated from its last moraine. This is the outlet river. Quite a waterfall. And looking down to the gorge, to where the other truck was parked, and some more of the moraines. Much of the interior of Iceland looks like this. Glacial gravel, scoured clean, no vegetation. As the glacier moves, the front of it tends to curl up, and you wind up with rocks and stones and piles of dirt on top. At the middle of July, several of us made our annual Round the Island trip. Here stopped on the bank or the edge of the Laxá River in the Kvalfjordur fjord. We went from here around the outer end of the Snæfellsnes Peninsula, here on the road Utnesvegur, the outer peninsula road. Those were the remnants of a volcano called Lundrangar. Here we're at Dritvík, and we move into a volcano, an old volcano called Birudalur, and a group of volcanoes called Hula Hula. This is the first time I actually parked a vehicle in the throat of an old volcano. We were all kind of listening for some rumbles, but didn't hear any. Our little band of 6. It was definitely the outer peninsula. There wasn't anyone inside. The terrain was really neat, very wild, and the whole point of the trip was beginning to break through the clouds. The volcano Snæfellsnesjökull. Snæfellsjökull was, among other things, the setting for Jules Verne's entrance in his novel Journey to the Center of the Earth. Some more views of Snæfellsjökull from the north side of the peninsula, and a lava field. This has been a fairly active geological area in the last 1,000 years or so. There's a lot of fresh lava. Not all of Iceland is rock and snow. There are occasional meadows of just incredibly beautiful flowers. A very interesting mountain called Kukifell, moving along the north coast of the Snæfellsnes. The storms had come back across the mountains this day, and it was definitely raining and windy. Another one of Iceland's hundreds of thousands of waterfalls. We got to Sticky's home, but the weather improved a little bit. Looking back along the north coast, some distant showers. We were going to go across the Vestfjords on the ferry. This one, the Baldur. This isn't an ordinary ferry. You don't drive on this thing. It's actually a converted fishing boat. They put your car on it, and you clamber down a ladder to get aboard by yourself. Here Dallas drives up. He's going to be the first. The method of loading was to drive on these slings, which they attach cables to the winches and the lift, and up you went. The crane was on board the ship, and every time it lifted up a vehicle, the old ship would heel way over. Being the first, Dallas's truck got a lot of attention. Down in the hold it went. Then it was my turn. I don't think Chevy had ever anticipated that one of its love trucks was going to do this. And then Rick. So far, so good. Makes you a little nervous, doesn't it? It's a lot of money bouncing around out there. To get it in at the very end of the cargo deck, they had to slide it into place, but these guys pretty well knew what they're doing. The ship holds 6 in the hold and 6 on the deck. As we leave Sticky's home, we're looking back along the north coast. The clouds were coming back across, but it really was dramatic. We were crossing the Breidafjordur, which is just chock-a-block full with little volcanic outcroppings and islands. It appears as if it had once been a lava flow that had later sunk into the sea. One of the islands looking over the trucks on the deck of the ship. This one was a real bird sanctuary. Lots and lots of seagulls, and puffins, and other kinds of gulls. Some more scenes looking back to the west along the north coast of the Snæfellsnes. As we enter the harbor at Breidafjordur, the mountains of the Vestfjords were pretty well cloud enshrouded. This was a pretty primitive harbor, basically a wharf. It wasn't even paved. And off came Walt's truck. Bet Ford never anticipated one of its Broncos doing that either. Mine. Watch that sucker bounce. Yeah. And here comes Dallas's out. Dallas found that red ball at Dritvik, and for 1,200 miles, the thing bounced around in the back of his truck. It was a great beacon for the rest of us to follow. This was an interesting thing to find along the coast. No markings, nothing, just an old fishing ship that had apparently been washed ashore in a storm many, many years ago. We stopped at a guest house, and one of their pets was this little kit fox. Never know what you're going to find in Iceland. Our destination on this particular leg of the trip was to the Flateyjarbók Peninsula, which is kind of well known for its puffin colonies. Puffin is a very strange bird. Truly unique in appearance. Appears to be a thoughtful bird. A fish eater. We'll see late in a few minutes here. Here we go. It has about the glide ratio of a brick. If it doesn't flap its wings at an extremely rapid rate, the word plummet would come to mind. But there were hundreds of them along the coast that day. It was kind of windy, stormy, cold, and they weren't much of an urge to fly, so we were able to get some pretty close-ups. These cliffs rise to about 1,500 feet above the sea, a little bit further to the east from where we're standing here. And it's a sheer drop. Looking west toward Greenland, this is the westernmost point of Europe, at Bjartangar. Typical for the West Fjords. A little stormy, very definitely cloudy, a little misty, and windswept.
Are you a happy camper? Are we having fun yet?
Yeah, I think we were having fun. Looking into the valley above Bildalur on the Arnarfjordur in the Vestfjords, this pass had been interesting. It had climbed to about 1,500 feet. Another waterfall marked on the map as Fossa, which just means waterfall. The fjord that this was at the head of was also called Fossafjord, the waterfall fjord. Sometimes I think that there are so many waterfalls in Iceland that they haven't gotten around to naming them all. And Dallas, as usual, was curious and had to go get the right picture. The rest of us stayed down below and watched. And driving along Arnarfjordur, this, believe it or not, is considered to be a main road in this part of Iceland. You could meet another vehicle here with difficulty. Found this river coming out of a lake, going down over the edge of the mountain. There's supposed to be a waterfall around here somewhere. And sure enough, there it was down below the mountain. Dynjandi, one of the most incredible waterfalls in Iceland and possibly even in the world. Here's a little bit closer up view. Dynjandi is about 300 feet high, about 100 feet wide at the top, and about 150 to 200 feet wide at the base. Comes down in this incredible cascade. We decided to go no further that day. This was the camping site. And this is what we got to listen to all night long. There were 6 other falls below this. So the total fall is about 500 feet. Talk about a restful sound to put yourself to sleep with. And even from a couple miles away across the fjord, Dinjandi was still pretty impressive. Some of the walls of the Vestfjords, the whole region looked like this. From 15 miles away, still Dinjandi was neat. And we climbed up over the mountains again and again, and finally we came over the top and saw below us the town of Isafjordur, the major urban center for the Vestfjords. About 5,000 people. And our campground in Isafjordur, on the edge of town, came complete with a waterfall, a rushing brook, and a few pine trees. And a whole lot of conversation, food eating. This part of the conversation, I think, was X-rated, so we'll leave that part out.
Front of the shop door. Ethel, is that you, Ethel? Come back here.
Yeah, I thought it was X-rated.
And tell us there, Mr. Rick, how was your four-wheel drive expedition?
Non-four-wheel drive road.
Non-four-wheel drive road? And do you have any comments about that there, Mr. Mark?
I'll take my Suzuki anywhere that other rice burner will go.
3
I
rice
fed,
burners.
hey,
Speaking of rice burners,
my squirrels,
rice
I fattened them up today. They're ready.
It's
to
red.
go.
did you decide to wash your truck
Yeah,
there?
it's red.
Oh
It's
my
all
goodness.
clean.
Up, we can see the tail end of it there, folks.
At least you don't get dirty. You know.
Non-dirty.
And as we left Isafjordur the next day, the mountains made an incredibly neat backdrop. And panning around to the major bay or inlet in this region, the Isafjordur. I'm looking across to the northernmost peninsula of the Vestfjords, which even in late July was still pretty well snow-covered. And unlike the more southern peninsula, the snow even came down to the sea. Way back in underneath those clouds is the northernmost glacier in Iceland, the Drangajökull. The light in the clouds can be really neat sometimes in Iceland, and this was a classic one. In Iceland, it's traditional to build a small house in front of your house for the trolls. This guy had a real hang-up about trolls. He built them a whole village. As we enter the Alftafjordur, again, contrast of light and dark. Some more views of Alftafjordur. a rare sight, and a rainbow over Hestafjordur. And sometimes not so pleasant things happen. The road was narrow, sudden turns, and part of the bank broke loose, and Smitty's truck rolled over. Nobody was hurt, but there was a major problem. How we're going to get this sucker out of there? Well, we called on Farmer Yon, and Farmer Yon brought a friend with a backhoe and a lot of ropes, a waltz winch, and slowly, a lot of work, we got it back upright, but it was still pretty well wedged inside this ravine. But some more moving around, and eventually we pulled that big old blazer out of there. A little bit banged about. But believe it or not, it ran. We got to Holmavik at the campground there. See a little bit of the damage that was done. Took a lot of duct tape to get the windows back in place, and a plastic windshield was used to replace the front one. As we move around the north coast, this is Hrudafjordur, another long deep fjord that comes into Iceland from the north. Iceland is not a huge country. It's about 250 miles east-west and 150 north-south. We were on a high point now on the north coast, looking back into the interior. At the Hofsjökull here, another one of the ice caps. And the mountains on the north of Iceland that you have to get through to get to Akureyri. Akureyri was definitely worth the visit because this place is green. They have a botanical garden here, flowers, plants, trees. It started in the early part of the 1900s. And in the summer, Akureyri's weather is so much better than the south coast. People come out and do what you normally expect to do in the summer. Take some of your clothes off anyway, and get a suntan. More flowers. Flowers outside in Iceland are a rare sight. Some views of Akureyri from the mountain above the town where the ski hill is, the Eyjafjallajökull. Geologically, this is one of the older parts of Iceland. The volcanic rock and lava has actually become converted into regular dirt. It grows things, particularly grass. Now some close-ups of the town. About 14,000 people live here. It's the second largest urban area of Iceland. Some scenes along the coast. There's actually the shore of the Eyjafjallajökull in Akureyri. There's quite a fishing fleet that works out of here. East of Akureyri, we went to Osbergi, a canyon with a lot of trees. It's one of the few places in Iceland where you actually can park your vehicles and your camping equipment amongst trees. The cliff walls were about 300 feet high. And there are sights here very rarely found elsewhere in Iceland, like a bird. There he goes, amongst the trees. A land bird, not even a seabird. There was a pool, which had ducks, which of course attracted the kids. And the kids had bread, which of course attracted more ducks, except for this independent-minded soul. The water was absolutely crystalline. This is a very rare thing to do in Iceland, walk in a forest. From a viewpoint in Osbergi the next morning, the valley was actually formed by cataclysmic floods, possibly at the end of one of the last glacier ages, by the river Jökulsá up the Jötlam. And it formed this very protected valley about 3 miles long and about 1 mile to 2 miles in width. The pool is actually at the base of the old waterfall. And this is the current canyon of the Jökulsá out the Jötlam, the glacier river of the mountains. It's Iceland's equivalent of the Grand Canyon. Quite a sight. The river cuts through old lava beds. It's a glacier river, so it's carrying an enormous amount of silt at all times of the year. This is one of the lower falls, one of the old river beds for the Jökulsá. It appeared that the river had a great deal of difficulty determining which way it was going to go across this lava. There were traces of a number of old riverbeds. You see the very smoothly polished rock from the river flow, some of the old sand, and finally, what we came for, Dettifoss, the most powerful waterfall in all of Europe. In Iceland, there is nothing to keep you from the edge of waterfalls, glaciers, hot springs. The level, or the closeness that you approach, is basically up to your own level of courage. Some got closer than others. This waterfall is about 150 feet tall. and as you can see, carries an enormous amount of water. After the roar of Dettifoss, a sound that could be heard from a mile to 2 miles away, the quietude of Lake Mývatn was very pleasant. This lake was formed in an old lava field, which in turn had flowed across previous lake bottom and marshes. As a result, there were a number of these pseudocraters in the lake, which had occurred when hot lava had flowed over the marshland and wet soil, causing the water beneath it to expand and turn into steam and blow out through the lava. All kinds of craters like this, called pseudocraters. In fact, we had the campground was right inside one of them. Parts of the lake are muddy and parts are not. The lake does have warm springs underneath it, and it's very shallow. This is the Kalfastrand and the Park Hofti on the edge of Mývatn. A very interesting place with lava pillars and some trees. One of the more active volcanoes in the background. That one's a real volcano, not a pseudo-volcano. And more of the pseudocraters in the lake. Just east of Mývatn is Namafjall, one of the more active geological regions of Iceland. It's right on the rift line of the North Atlantic Ridge. And there's all kinds of hot vents and steam and mud pots virtually at the base of the volcano Krafla, which is due to erupt any time in the next year or so. This goes by the name of a sulfutera because of all the sulfur that's being put out by the water. Boiling mud. And as always, the ever-present wind.
I'd like to hike up on Krafla.
Splat. Splat. Sometimes more splat than others. Mývatn is known for its wildlife, particularly its bird life. And there are sometimes 100,000 nesting pairs of ducks, geese, swans, etc. in the lake at a time. These were swans. Hundreds and hundreds of swans. Then we go to Godafoss. A very nice waterfall just to the west of Mývatn. Godafoss got its name of the God's Falls because here one of the heathen chieftains threw his heathen symbols into the falls and adopted Christianity. Very nice fall with that split fall in the center fall tube. Godafoss, the God's Falls. For our return journey, we went across the center of the island. The center is, as you can see, pretty much barren. Some grass, some gravel. And here at Kjolder, the valley between Hofsjökull and Longjökull. Longjökull is the glacier you're seeing. Very high, about 2,500 to 3,000 feet above sea level. Very windswept. An occasional stream. mostly a gravel desert. And as usual in Iceland, the streams in the interior are unbridged, so there's only one way to get across, that's to drive through them. They're normally not too difficult, 2 to 3 feet deep, gravel bottom. If you go slow, it's no problem, particularly in a group, because if you get into trouble, somebody will be there to help you. Kverfjallur, there is an old lava flow which has produced these hot springs. It's a bit of an oasis, grass, occasional sheep grazing amongst the springs, and lots of hot springs all over the place. The Icelanders, being ingenious, piped some of the water from a hot spring into a pool below the hut and made it into a nice hot tub for soaking. Very relaxing, very comfortable after driving. Also a nice change of 40-degree temperatures, or the next morning, 30-degree temperatures. Into July, it was snowing. The next weekend, we went to Geyser. The Geyser district has several active geysers, hot springs, like the one about to erupt here, Stroker. It goes off anywhere from every 8 to 20 minutes. You can count on it doing it, you just can't count on it exactly right on time. And bubbling hot springs. And glugging hot springs. But the whole center of interest this day was this pool. Above the Great Geyser, the geyser from which all the geysers in the world have taken their name. It's on a hillside here, as you can see, pretty barren, just grassy plateau in the background. The Great Geyser used to erupt very regularly, but it has gradually quit. And so now, twice a year, the Icelanders throw bar soap into it, which changes its thermodynamics and causes it to erupt. These days being well known, it brings out a crowd. This particular day, there were around 5,000 Icelanders here. It takes about 30 or 40 minutes for the soap to dissolve and change the thermodynamics of the pool. Just tossing it in. The countryside in the background, incidentally, is considered to be good Icelandic farmland. It's got good grass for sheep and cattle. It was a nice-sized crowd. And finally, the Great Geyser starts to bubble and boil. Starts to throw a lot of water up first, which makes it easier for it to turn into a full-fledged geyser later on. Lots of soap suds at this point. And a very interesting smell, mixture of soap and sulfur. This process took a while, perhaps 30 minutes. As said before, there's nothing that keeps you from getting up close. These people were virtually standing in the hot water coming out of this thing. And finally it erupts. Much to the pleasure of the crowd, which was speaking at least 5 languages. There being tourists from Germany, England, the Scandinavian countries, France, Italy, and wherever else in Iceland in the summertime, plus a few Americans, of course. As the water got thrown out, the velocity of the steam increased and increased. Of course, we were all curious where all that had come out of and what it looked like, so we went up and took a look. Now, Gullfoss, the Golden Waterfall, about 15 miles west, 10 to 15 miles west of Geyser, Iceland's second largest waterfall behind Dettifoss, and perhaps its most beautiful, on the Kavita River. And we'll just relax with some scenes from Gullfoss here. Gullfoss gets its name, the Golden Waterfall, from the amount of spray it puts up, which if the sun is right makes a beautiful rainbow, a golden rainbow. A most impressive waterfall. From Gullfoss, we journeyed back to Stoing. That's Hauifoss in the distance, that white spot on the center of the picture. It's actually a very tall waterfall. The scene's coming up. But to get to it, from what we could determine, you had to drive up through the riverbed of the Fussau, the river of the falls. Okay, we said, we'll do that. So off we went. And here we are, driving through the river. A little bumpy. This river had pushed out an awful lot of big boulders. Looks like you're in a boat, but you're not. You're in my little truck, bouncing along. We hadn't noticed how well we were doing until we got up ahead a little further here. and looked back to see where everybody else was. Oh, one of them had gotten hung up on one of the crossings, so we just waited a little bit. And we got up as far as we could, and then we hiked. This is the waterfall. Hauifoss, the high waterfall, second highest in Iceland, almost 400 feet in height. As it cuts down through these old lava beds. And we hiked back out. Some of it, only the hardy ones made the hike in this time. There's the riverbed, the mountains. Where are the trucks? Ah. Pretty lonely looking out there. Well, everybody else wanted to see the waterfall, but they didn't want to hike, so we figured out another way to do it. Our next journey, over Labor Day to Landmannalaugar, here we are traveling along the main road between Keflavik and Reykjavik on the Reykjanes Peninsula. With some more of Iceland's very interesting cloud formations and what was possible of the sun to get through. Then turning south from Reykjavik and heading into the mountains. Over the mountains, Kverfjallar, Kvergerti. Motoring through the grasslands. The Eyjafjallajökull in the background, Selfoss. Turning back into the interior now, our first view of Hekla. Some more views of the mountains. As you get near Hekla, the land starts getting a little bit more lava-ish, pumice rock stuff that's been thrown out of this mountain. Some more of Hekla. The Thorsau River in the foreground. Iceland's largest river. Here at low water. Hekla was originally considered to be one of the gates of hell. It's usually cloud and shrouded, has erupted very often. A nice road here. This is still considered to be a secondary road. And if you work at it, you can meet another vehicle on here. After all, this one's been graded. Built up a little bit here and there. The Thorsau again, as you can see, definitely at low water. As you go further in, the grass gets thinner, the moss appears where it appears at all, and the gravel starts to show through. But we found a better way to get up to Hauifoss with the whole gang. And always the wind. Hauifoss from above. And Grani, its nearby twin, also about 400 feet high.
I won't believe the size of it since we don't have a point of reference, so I'll just have to tell her it's great.
All right.
Turn it off.
Thanks, Carolyn. And here's Linda. She went over to get a couple of pictures. Now let's put everything in perspective here. She was across the canyon. Now you see how high the waterfall is.
Look at the broken things down there. I only got one picture left. Damn it! Where is he going? He's trying to go down to the waterfall itself.
What do you think of this place?
It's nice, it's very cold, and I refuse to go near the edges. Do you hear me?
Why do you refuse to go near the edge, Jenny?
Because one can fall on the edges.
Oh, okay.
Unlike other people in our group that are out climbing the mountain.
Like Dallas.
Like Dallas, yes.
Okay.
Bye.
The Rocky Roaders in action. Or more precisely, the Rocky Roaders in commentary. Another view of Hecla. As we moved further into the interior, the landscape became more lunar and less terrestrial in appearance. These lakes are on the Tungnau River above the power plant at Sigilda. A little bit of sparse vegetation is all that's left by this point. And we motor on. Now we turn onto the mountain track, F22. To go into Landmannalaugar proper. This is actually considered to be a good track. It's been graded at least once or twice this year. No huge boulders. Across a sand desert. Sand, pumice. Volcanic dust. No vegetation. Lava bombs and other stuff that's been thrown from Hecla. Ah, vegetation. One mountain with some moss.
Well, remember last year it snowed and melted.
Yeah, we were talking about snow. Here it was at the beginning of September. As we approach Landmannalaugar, we come up on Frostastaðavatn, the Frosty Station Lake. This is a very colorful part of Iceland. The mountains are rhyolitic, multicolored stones. At least there's vegetation now. Yep, that's definitely snow on the windshield. You can only get into Landmannalaugar a couple months of the year. It's snowbound the rest of the time. A few hardy souls do it in the winter with extremely big tires that float over the snowbanks. The Jökulgil River and the entrance to Landmannalaugar. Considered on a 1 to 4 star scale to be a 3-star for Icelandic tourist spots, mainly because of the lava, or obsidian actually, in the form of lava, and the multiple colored stones in the mountains. Hot springs, just a bunch of them, through another river. This one being unusual because it was flowed out of the hot springs, it was about 70 degrees. And of course, we always wait to make sure everybody makes it across. Had to put your hands down, see if you could get in that warm water.
Look at the ducks. They are beating feet.
That'd be hell going across the river and running over a duck.
There are ways to cross a river like this, nice and slow. So don't make a big bow wave. And then there are other ways of crossing, a little too fast here. All that water comes through the radiator and floods the engine if you're not careful. And we were a little unsure if that one was going to make it that time. Here comes Dallas, a real master at this stuff. But curious. And the monster makes it. Next morning, very quiet in here. No wind, just the sound of the stream, the Yokol Gill. Extraordinary mountains. Loiger, some black mountains, some others, is unique enough that it attracts a very large crowd almost every night, or maybe precisely every day in the summer, since it's usually no dark at all. There is a campground at the base of that lava flow there. Just a little grass has been laid down, and a mountain hut, sleeping bag accommodations, coming into the picture here. This hut, believe it or not, holds 150 people. The steam is rising from the hot springs. The stream had been blocked by the lava flow and then eventually made its way back underneath, being heated in the process. In fact, the whole land here, the whole ground was a little hot. Those bubbles that are coming up are bubbles from the bottom, where it's so hot that the water is actually boiling up through the gravel. But over at the base of the lava is a perfect place, about 100-degree water. And so it's become a bathing area. It was great after a high day of hiking up here. There's some of the bubbles coming up off the bottom.
The double hornback growler. You know what a double hornback growler is?
Idea. What does Jenny think of the idea of the double hornback growler?
But all good things must come to an end. To get out along Monoliger via the route to the sea requires a number of river crossings.
I was trying to
And another one. As we splash through. Very eroded mountainside, made of compacted dust and gravel from volcanic explosions, called tuff. It erodes a little differently than most places do.
Oh, there's nobody coming down.
Yeah, nobody did come down, so we were okay. Tindafjall, one of the higher mountains in this region. Really quite a sight. And some steep hillsides. More rivers to cross. And finally, we stop at the top of Herthubreid and look into the rift, Elgjá. This is one of the places where the North Atlantic Ridge splits Iceland, or is splitting Iceland. The far side of the picture is gradually moving away from the near side of the picture. In the background is a huge volcanic lava flow from the Laki explosions of the 1780s, which filled up 2 river valleys. The river is still figuring its way through those. In the distance is the Atlantic Ocean beyond those clouds. And in the distance here, the east side of Mýrdalsjökull, another one of Iceland's ice caps. Here you can see where the earth has been torn apart. The far side used to belong to the near side of the picture. Especially here, you can notice it. The hill in the middle used to be connected to the hill on the left until they were split, or is actually continuing to split here. As we drive up into Elgjá, this is not a canyon that was formed by erosion. However, water does fall into it. It makes, in this particular case, a very nice waterfall called Ófærufoss. Complete with an arch. Looking at the head of Elgjá. Some more of Iceland's natural beauties. Actually, it's an American beauty in this case. As Carolyn moves down the side of that cliff, she had to get the right position to get her photograph. Ah, this is the spot. As we move down the south coast again, coming back to the base, south coast cliffs are around 1,000 to 3,000 feet in height. Some unnamed waterfalls, like this one. Falls about 300 or 400 feet high. Iceland's again. We saw it in April, now we see it in September. It's a very interesting fall. It doesn't really roar like the others, it sort of hisses. At the end of September, we went into into Thorsmark again. It had been raining for several days, and the streams and rivers were a little high. That's Jenny, and her first trip of driving her own vehicle on a rocky road expedition. The wind was blowing about 35 knots, about 42 miles an hour, and the temperature was about 42 degrees. It was cold. Sometimes you mostly float across. Now she had her hands over her face, and she would again before that trip was over. Thorsmark, a very nice valley. But the getting in there is not so easy, especially when these streams are high. There's about 20 of these things that have to be crossed, and 3 of them are very significant. It definitely had been raining. Again, we get back to the Gig Yokel and its lake, which is about 140 feet, 130 to 140 feet deep, dug out by the glacier. We're standing on the glacier's moraine right here. I can see what this thing looked like. It was all snow covered in April. One of the two glaciers that come down off of the AFL Yokel. A little reconnoitering session here before we cross the Gig Yokel Sow, the glacier river coming out of that glacier. Dallas goes first, and one of the Icelanders who was coming out comes across at the same time. I think he waited to see if we were going to go first. Not too bad at crossing, didn't even come up over the top of the tires. Pat Lee goes in, another one of our ladies, on her first outing too. Oops, there went my hat. Sid and Cindy, doing just fine, a little fast, but doing okay. And then the Smart family. And Jennifer and her group. And Jim Robinson. The wind was definitely blowing that day. Watch what it does when it catches that lid. And then, of course, it was our turn. Upstream, we come to the next major river, the Steinholtzau. Looks like it was going to be pretty exciting, but it actually turned out to be a relatively quiet crossing here. Fast, but not very deep. And the first ridge of Thorsmort proper. A view of the Markefilo Valley. And sometimes river crossings and stream crossings are just plain a lot of fun. Lots of splashes. Here's our gang, 12 vehicles, 27 adults and 12 kids. And some very stunning mountain scenery. Sometimes the road was a river, or the river is a road, so we simply called this the River Road. Which went on and on and on.
Like we're still crossing this, I mean, on this river road.
Yeah, that little portable bridge is normally where the worst part of the next stream is going to be, for hikers and such to get across. So I figured, this would be the hard part. But it wasn't. This was the hard part. Let's listen to our crossing.
It's big time.
Big rock.
Big rocks indeed. We did okay, but the Jeep didn't do quite so well. Dave and Dale were stuck until I could get the rope on them, get them out. This is the look of concern. They weren't going to float away, but the back end of the Jeep was definitely getting a little wet. Water was coming in. And a couple of tugs. And a little tire spin. And we're out. And to everybody's happiness. Watch this pickup, if you believe there's a current. But this was the tough one. This is Crosau. A number of people have lost their lives over the years trying to cross this thing. The current's about 20 knots and 3 to 4 feet deep in the middle. Dallas makes our first crossing. And everybody's happy when he gets out. And the bus driver who pulls up and is waiting goes out and pulls the river for holes. He doesn't have four-wheel drive. And back across again. This is where to cross. Obviously, this one works. And then the bus. It's no ordinary city bus. This is a cross-country bus built high, but not a real four-wheel drive. Dave and Dale and their Jeep, or submarine as the case may be right here. Pat's ready to make her crossing. That's pretty good until right about here. Oops. But she gets it restarted and is back out almost instantly. Watch Cindy's face. Well, if you can see it between her hands.
Did you see that terror on her face?
Yes, indeed. There was terror on her face. And Jennifer makes her crossing.
That was the best crossing yet.
Everybody's happy. And the Smart family.
I'm real proud of them.
The AFA yokel. And the scenes from Thorsmork. Wooded hillsides, looks like something out of perhaps Kentucky or Tennessee. A peaceful place. And because it's protected by these mountains, it oftentimes has very good summer weather. Skagafjord Skali, a big mountain hut operated by Frithfilag Islands, the Icelandic touring club. They are not just building holds 180 people. Sleeping bag accommodations again. Very nice in the interior. Looking back down at this crossing where we had so much trouble from a 1,500-foot hill that's nearby, the river is the Vanau. This Jeep doesn't seem to have too much trouble. But as you can see, it's definitely a very abraded runoff. The stream going every which way here. As we look into the upper part of the Thorsmark Valley, a region called Godeland, the Godland. Even here there were fences built to keep the sheep penned in. Steinholzau, Gegjokul, and above it all, the Eyjafjallajökull. Now we watch this Jeep as he makes his crossing of the Krossau. Using the term Jeep a little loosely, in Iceland, all four-wheel drive vehicles are called Jeeps, no matter whether they're Jeeps, or Suzukis, or Isuzus, or whatever. Again, Skagafjordskali. It's amazing what a big zoom will do from the top of a long, really tall hill. Thorsmark. These are the Vestmannaeyjar, the Westman Islands from the coast at sunset. Looking across the sand plains. Those are actually, they're mountains, all right, but they're about 10 miles off the coast. And then we drive into Skogafoss, now seen in October. A lot more water than when it was in April. This is a waterfall you can drive right up to. Just as close as you want to get. If you get any closer than this, though, you're going to get really wet from the mist. But the birds liked it up here. Lots of seabirds nesting on these cliffs. And looking back down along the river and out to the sea at sunset. There's almost no pollution in Iceland air, so the sunsets can really be stunning. Clouds in perfect definition. And as we watch the sunset over the Holtsos with the Vestmannaeyjar in the background, we hope you've enjoyed sharing these adventures of the Rocky Road four-wheelers in 1989 in Iceland. Thank you for watching.